Alley. In this episode, I'm going to detail the story of founder of the Avenues gang and prolific bodybuilder, Craig Monson. Craig Monson was born around 1950 in Conway, Arkansas, to a single mother and two older brothers, and later, a little brother. With the lack of opportunity and severe racism they faced, Craig's mother would pack up the family and head by bus to Los Angeles for a better life. Los Angeles would be a lot different than Arkansas, and Craig's family would bounce around a lot, trying to get stable. They would live in different areas in LA and also Compton. In Los Angeles in the 50s and 60s, even though it wasn't as bad as Arkansas, there was still a lot of racism in Los Angeles for African Americans. Craig's mother would later marry her boyfriend, who would become his stepfather, and the family would move on 83rd and Hooper, on the east side of South Central. Craig would be around 13 years old around this time. Craig would fast become adapted to his new neighborhood and make a lot.
Say it ain't so. A lot of racism for African Americans. I thought racism was over. That's what they be telling me in the comments. Welcome to another episode, everyone. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. And as we just heard, we're talking about Craig Monson, the huge powerhouse bodybuilder who started the Avenues, a gang. He then went off to prison. He slapped the Crip founder, Raymond Washington. He exercised and worked out with Tookie Williams and Arnold Schwarzenegger. This individual has a cold story and he's still around. Let's continue.
A lot of new friends, and hanging out with his friends in his neighborhood would be the first time he would start lifting weights. Craig would attend Charles Drew Middle School, and his love of bodybuilding would show. At a time when bodybuilding was mostly frowned upon, the staff at Charles Drew began to worry that Craig was dealing with some type of psychological issue. The school's vice principal quickly notified Craig's mother and stepfather and asked them to come to his office for a private meeting. He would go on to say that Craig's obsession with constantly working out with the school equipment had to stop. He would say all he wants to do is work out in the gym. All his time goes to working out, and something has to be going on with him. But there was nothing wrong with Craig. He just really enjoyed working out. Realizing the determination, commitment, and dedication her son displayed for weightlifting, Craig's mother decided to buy her 13-year-old son his first set of weights. Outside of working out, Craig loved football, which he was on several teams, and played in his neighborhood. With his own personal set of weights, Craig began working out even more, which is when his body started rapidly responding to his training. By age 14, his arms had developed to a point where he cut slits into his short-sleeve t-shirts to make room and show off his growing biceps. By the time he reached Fremont High School, his arms measured to 14 inches. By the time he left, they measured to 17. Craig wasn't into playing football at Fremont, but soon realized that bodybuilding, not football, was his true calling. Los Angeles had several black gangs in the 60s, like the Businessman and the Slawsons, among many others. But around 1967, Craig, who was 17, along with several of his friends, were drinking and smoking and hanging out, when Craig would say they needed a name for their crew. Craig would come up with the name, the Avenues, with them being on Hooper Avenue. The Avenues would be comprised of several of Craig's friends who lived in the neighborhood, and that was numerous of young teens from surrounding streets. Craig's name began to ring bells off his physical presence, putting fear in many people just off his appearance, but people who tried him would pay for it. This was a long time before guns was constantly used, and it was all about fighting and using your hands, and Craig was good with his. People started to call him Big Mons because he was known to knock people out. But with getting so much attention, Craig would also get known by the police, and they would constantly harass him because he stood out with his size, and they would be intimidated by him. They would always point him out, and this would lead to things like the police picking him up and taking him to an alley and sticking a shotgun in his mouth to put fear in him. Craig didn't take any nonsense from anybody, and this led to him getting kicked out of various high schools. He would even get kicked out of a school for knocking out his teacher. He would be arrested after school, and he would go to camp to serve his time, which he would do several stints in jail. After getting out, Craig would go back to running the Avenues, which the gang wasn't like most gangs in later years. The Avenues just partied, hung out, and worked out, and sometimes they would get into altercations and whoop ass. Craig would later meet the future founder of the Crips, Raymond Washington, around 1968, when Craig was 18 and Raymond was 15. Raymond was known to have a smart mouth and always talk slick, which Craig despised. It would go all bad one day when Raymond kept making jokes at the expense of Craig's mom, which led to Craig slapping Raymond Washington. Raymond, who wanted to be a part of the Avenues, would be told not to come back around. Raymond would respond by saying, "I'm making my own gang." Craig, from his own words, would say, "What you gonna name it, you little Crip?" with Raymond having a limp, and that would be the name that Raymond Washington would later choose for his gang. They would be called the Crips. Craig would later be arrested when he was around 20 years old in 1970. An intruder, who had just been released from jail days prior, would break into Craig's home when he thought Craig was gone. The intruder was armed with a hammer and ransacked the home. A scuffle would quickly break out.
There are, of course, many theories on exactly how the Crip started. That is one of the theories. There are a couple of others out there. I don't know. I wasn't there. But he certainly slapped Raymond Washington. This has been clear for some time and told him not to come back around. Raymond Washington was trying to join his gang. We're going to get into Raymond Washington soon. Of course, they blame the Hoovers for Raymond Washington's death. They say that the Hoovers killed him. This is what started some of the hatred around L.A. with the Hoovers. Oh, man.
And Craig got hit in the head with his hammer. During the melee, Craig was able to wrestle the hammer away from the intruder and began using it on him, which resulted in the man's death. Craig's friend would later snitch on him, but Craig was trying to figure out a way to dump the body. Craig saw this as an unfortunate unseen event as he was protecting his household, and he thought this was self-defense, but courts disagreed and charged him and convicted him of involuntary manslaughter. In 1971, he would go to Tracy, then San Quentin State Prison, where he continued living.
So a man broke into his house, Craig Monson here, and as you can see, he is a monster. This dude is humongous, and he got bigger and bigger. You're going to see some other pictures of him, I'm sure. He is humongous. He was working out with Tookie, Raymond Washington, all these dudes. Look at them. They all big. That's when they was hitting that iron, that real iron, that pig iron, back in San Quentin and all that. He did some time in Quentin. He is indeed a monster, and he stood up to those individuals, started his gang, and ran them dudes up out of there. But of course, Raymond Washington ended up starting his own gang.
Weights, and he would gain 22-inch arms. Craig wouldn't be released until 1975. By the time that Craig was released, the area he grew up in would be completely different. The avenues will be no more, and Raymond Washington, who he once slapped, will be the leader of the...
But the dude ran into his house, trying to rob him and rob his house, or what have you. And he killed the dude with a hammer inside of his home that the dude was trying to break into, or had broken into, and trying to rob him, putting his life and his family's life in danger. He killed the dude with a hammer, went to work on him apparently. He thought that he was going to get off because it was self-defense, in his mind, and probably according to the law too, or what have you. I don't know, but for whatever reason, they convicted him of manslaughter and sent him off to prison. That's how he ended up in San Quentin. But I mean, my goodness. George Zimmerman doesn't go to jail, but he does. For a man coming into his home and trying to rob him, and he defends his home and beats the man to death. That's the American justice system for you people.
The largest black gang in Los Angeles, the Crips. After being released from prison, Craig would do something most people wouldn't expect. He became a hairdresser. With him growing up having barber experience, he was naturally good with doing things involving hair, but he also continued lifting weights. Craig would even have a relationship with some Crip leaders, like Stanley Tookie Williams, who Craig would often work out with. Tookie looked at Craig as a big homie and a person he admired, especially on a bodybuilding scale. Craig became a regular at the pit in Venice Beach and always entertained large number of crowds. Crowds loved witnessing him do incredible feats of strength, sometimes lifting over 500 pounds. Craig was 6'2", reaching 280 pounds of muscle. While being on Venice Beach, a man would introduce himself to Craig and tell him he can help him start competing in bodybuilding competitions. Craig would start taking steroids to enhance his body. Craig would compete in competitions around the world in places like Switzerland and France, where he would compete and win a lot of competitions. Craig began to blowing up and becoming a superstar seemingly overnight while working at the city gym in LA and the pit at Venice Beach. He would even meet the likes of bodybuilders like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who Craig was even outdoing, with Craig being stronger than Arnold. Craig would become a person larger than life.
Man, my goodness, look at this dude right here. Shakes. This freaking AI or something? This dude arms. Whoa, that hurt real bad when he slapped Raymond Washington, for sure, bro. Seriously, look at his arms. God. Whoa, this guy. He's bigger than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
At the height of Craig's bodybuilding fame in the mid-1980s, he can often be seen riding in chauffeur limousines and Mercedes-Benzes on the streets of Hollywood. Everybody wanted to be seen with Craig, and he would gain the name, the Hawk. But Craig's life would take a major turn for the worse. He picked up a drug habit with him being in Hollywood, and his addiction got so bad, he stopped working out. Most of the 90s, Craig was trying to fight addiction and being in rehab. Craig would distance himself from Hollywood, and he was able to attain employment working at a club. He would kick his drug habit, and he later picked up lifting again, and he was able to attain his Hawk-like frame again. The later years of Craig's life, he still worked out and did several interviews and began to train people and make a presence on social media. Craig Monson is in his 70s and now still lifting weights 5 to 6 times a week, and he has even made a book about his life and is in the works of making a documentary about himself. This will conclude this episode.
Wow. And they have other stories on Craig Monson that are longer and more detailed, but that pretty much gets to the point. A huge dude, as we can see, that started his own gang there in Los Angeles, the Avenues, because he lived on 83rd and Hooper. Went to prison for what was probably self-defense, but whatever the case, he still went to prison, San Quentin. And by the time he got out of prison, the individual that he had slapped before, Raymond Washington, had started his gang, the Crips. Certainly he wasn't going to try to slap him at that time because certainly he had a lot of power and can get something done to that individual by that juncture by the time he had gotten out of prison. Of course, Raymond Washington ended up losing his life. But there you have it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I don't know. I don't know why he ended up going to prison for killing this dude with the hammer that broke into his home. He was protecting himself and his family. Such is the law here in the country. It is selective indeed, the law. But he's pretty much changed his life. He got out, became a hairstylist, a barber, or what have you, and wrote a book. Is still around. Had problems with drugs. Got off of the drugs. Got his physique back. And he's 70 years old or so, and still going. It's more than we can say for a lot of people. So obviously he's a strong individual. He's still going. He's been through a lot in his life, prison and all of this, and he's still here, still kicking at 70 plus, still working out, still strong, still look good. Shout out to Craig Monson, who apparently changed his life and stopped gang banging, and the gang he had started and all that went a different route when he got out of prison. And we are against the streets around these parts, so we support that. Stay safe and stay free, people.